Mother-in-law gave iPhones to every grandchild except my daughter. She's not blood, so I replied, "Pack your bags and get out of my house. These are for the family, sweetheart." My mother-in-law's remarks pierced the air like shattered glass as my 8-year-old daughter peered at the iPhone 16 Pro Max that she had just distributed to the other children. The hush that ensued was deafening. 20 people were in my living room in the house I bought, watching her purposefully exclude my small kid from the most costly family gift of the year. "Why isn't there one for me, grandmother?" my kid inquired with that soul-crushing innocence. "Because you are not truly a family treasure. These are exclusively for my blood grandchildren." The sound of my daughter running upstairs wailing, mixed with the visitor's uneasy laughing. When I approached my mother-in-law, she simply shrugged. "This is my money. I will give it to anybody I choose." My wife returned home from her trip the following day. Her reaction froze my blood. "Mom is just old. I'm sure she didn't mean any harm. You're overreacting, as usual." That night, everything changed. I informed my wife that she had 24 hours to make a decision. Either your mother leaves my house, or you accompany her. The first combat occurred at daybreak. My wife discovered me in the kitchen, pouring coffee with the calm of someone who has already taken a final decision. "You can't just put her out on the street," she yelled in that high-pitched voice she had when she was losing control. "She's my mom. She is old," I said without raising my voice. "This is my house. The deadline cannot be negotiated. So what is she supposed to do? Live on the streets?" She should have thought about that before humiliating my daughter. The slight was intended for the little girl you've reared since she was 2. The tiny girl who calls you mom. I could see her face crumble as I put it into perspective. However, the period of vulnerability lasted only seconds before familial loyalty closed ranks. My mother-in-law became emboldened by my wife's backing and shut herself in the guest suite. When I went down to remind her that she only had 18 hours left, she smiled, which chilled my blood. "I am not going anywhere, I have tenancy rights." Her voice was filled with the confidence that only legal ignorance can bring. "And if you try anything, I will call the cops for domestic violence." My wife became her personal servant, delivering her meals and serving as a human shield. "Leave her alone," she would tell me whenever I reached that part of the house. "She is already stressed enough." That afternoon, I made the call that changed everything. My lawyer confirmed what I had suspected. A legal eviction could take several months. He advised me, as a professional who fees by the minute, to record every breath that woman takes in your home. Every insult, every threat, every time she spits at you. In hostile eviction proceedings, the one with the best paperwork wins. That night, I generated a password-protected digital file. I dubbed it a war diary and began to log everything. Date, time, and complete description. Each slam of the delicious door. Every veiled insult she mumbled as I walked past the kitchen. Every time my daughter came downstairs, she cried because Grandma refused to communicate to me. The first revelation occurred when I reviewed the bank statements. My wife had given her the debit card. The charges were outrageous. Amazon charges $340 for a premium coffee maker shipped directly to the apartment. $180 for Korean skincare goods. Premium vitamin supplements cost $95. Seriously, I showed the statement to my wife. "You're giving her money for what she did to our daughter." She replied, without looking me in the eye, "About their medical expenses. She is old. She requires things." I documented each transaction. Each expensive purchase added another line to my file, proving that there was no humility or guilt. The nuclear escalation occurred a week later. A social worker from Child Protective Services knocked on my home, bringing an anonymous complaint. Serious home tensions create an unstable and potentially dangerous setting for a kid. When I carefully presented the problem, giving copies of my initial diary as proof of a pattern of antagonism and emotional abuse against my daughter, her attitude changed dramatically. Before leaving, she stated that the individual who created this report supplied very particular information on your residence. Details that only someone who lives here would know. When I showed my wife the report, she refused to believe it. It must have been someone else. "You're making up stories to turn me against my mother." Her eyes glowed with the blazing wrath that occurs when reality collides with denial. That night, I mounted security cameras around the communal spaces. It is a suggestion from the social worker. I informed them during supper to ensure transparency in the household. My wife could not object. My mother-in-law became pallid. I served the formal eviction notice the next day. 30 days. The official clock had started ticking. The house was turned into a Cold War zone. My wife retreated to the living room sofa and refused to share a bed with me. Our daughter was stuck in a deafening quiet. But in the midst of the chaos, I did something that left me feeling odd. I discreetly got my daughter the new iPhone 16 Pro Max. I handed it to her in her room. The box is wrapped in basic gift paper. "This is from Dad," I replied, holding her as her eyes welled up with delighted emotions. "But keep it a secret for now, okay? So we don't cause more difficulty." It was my way of safeguarding her in the midst of the commotion, of reminding her that no matter what occurred, she was my top priority. As I examined the camera footage each night, I knew something. This was more than just kicking my mother-in-law out. My goal had altered. I wanted to free my wife from her own denial before it was too late for all three of us. The official eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a sheriff who appeared more uncomfortable than we were. 30 days. The conflict has become official. My mother-in-law accepted the document with a smile that chilled my blood. She gave me 30 days to locate an excellent lawyer who would teach me who was truly in power here, waving the paper like confetti. The cameras I'd installed proved to be my salvation. The first capture occurred that same afternoon. I was examining the recordings when I overheard my mother-in-law conversing with my wife in the kitchen. "When this idiot runs out of money to hire lawyers, he will give up. Furthermore, this home should be yours by right. You are my daughter, not him." My wife whispered something inaudible, but she did not contradict herself. I saved the file immediately. The second capture occurred 2 days later. I caught her accidentally scratching the hardwood floor in the living room with one of her large luggage, which she dragged with deliberate force while staring directly at me. When I feigned not to notice, she smiled and continued doing it. "What exactly happened here?" I asked my wife that night, pointing to the marks. "It must have been an accident. Mom has arthritis. She is not very good at carrying things." But I had the video. Every intentional action, every malicious smile. The third capture changed everything. The hallway camera captured her entering my office when she assumed no one was present. I saw her walk through my desk, unlock drawers, and ultimately take a pair of silver cufflinks that belonged to my father and place them in her pocketbook. When I told my wife that things were missing, her response revealed how lost she was. "I'm sure she merely stashed them somewhere secure so they don't get lost among all the attorneys and papers." My wife had passed a line. It was no longer simply denial, there was active complicity. The final straw came a week later. I was working from home when I heard cries in the garden. I dashed out and saw my kid screaming beside the water, completely soaking with her clothing on. "What happened?" I yelled at my mother-in-law who was standing on the edge, arms crossed. "She slipped," she added with a nasty smile I recognized all too well. She was running where she should not have been. My daughter trembled in my arms. "Daddy, I didn't slip. Grandma pushed me because I told her I didn't love her anymore." "Children lie all the time," my mother-in-law responded, "especially those who haven't learned to respect their elders." That night, while I dried my daughter's hair, I took a life-changing decision. It was time to put a stop to this farce. My mother-in-law had gone for a walk, most likely to complain to a neighbor about how terrible I was. I waited for the right moment to tell my wife that I wanted to have a truce night to talk and sort things out like adults. I ordered her favorite food from that Thai restaurant she adored, placed candles on the dining room table, and created a false hope atmosphere. We had the house to ourselves. My wife sat at the table with a hesitant face, as if anticipating an apology or a capitulation. Her hands were clenched, frightened but hopeful. I didn't say anything at first, simply turning on the dining room TV and connecting my laptop. She inquired. "I want to show you something," I said with the calm that comes from holding all the cards. The first video began to play, with her mother telling her that the house should be hers by right, and that I was an idiot who would give up. I watched my wife's face tense. "This must be out of context," she murmured, but her voice no longer sounded convinced. "Wait, there's more." The second video showed the deliberate sabotage of the floor, every calculated movement, every defiant look at the camera. My wife started shaking her head, but her eyes were fixed on the screen. The third video was the final blow, the theft of my father's cufflinks, which was clear, sharp, and undeniable. I saw her open my desk, specifically look for those items, and hide them in her purse. My wife fell silent, her mouth agape. "And this," I said, playing the audio my lawyer had legally obtained, "is the call to Child Protective Services." My mother-in-law's voice was unmistakable. "Yes, I want to report a dangerous situation for a minor. The stepfather is creating a hostile and violent environment, and the child is at risk." My wife's house of cards, built on denial, collapsed in an instant. I watched her face go through all the stages: shock, comprehension, pain, anger. She burst into tears, but these tears were different. She wasn't crying for her mother or the situation. She was crying for her own blindness, for the pain she had allowed to be inflicted on the child she had raised as her own, for the betrayal she had unwittingly enabled. "Oh my God," she said quietly. "How could I have been so blind? How could I allow her to do this to our daughter?" At that point, we heard the front door close. My mother-in-law had returned from her walk, likely satisfied with poisoning another neighbor against me. My wife brushed away her tears and rose from the table with a drive I hadn't seen in years. She strode toward the guest suite with steps that sounded like hammer blows. I followed her discreetly, remaining in the hallway. This was her struggle, and she had to win it alone. She opened the door without knocking. My mother-in-law was organizing her day's purchases. She had spent more of my wife's money on fancy items she did not require. My wife spoke in a hard, steely tone that I had never heard her employ before. "Pack your belongings. You are leaving now." My mother-in-law turned with her condescending smile, which she had honed over decades. "Excuse me. I am not going anywhere. This is just as much my home as yours. I watched the videos, Mom. I witnessed everything." My mother-in-law's smile faded as quickly as it had appeared. "I spotted you stealing. I watched you intentionally harm the house. I heard you contacted social services to damage an innocent child." My wife's voice quivered, but not with fear, but with controlled rage, "And I saw you shove my daughter into the water." "You have no proof of any of that," my mother-in-law protested, but her arrogance had vanished. My wife pulled out her phone and showed her one of the videos. "Isn't this proof?" My mother-in-law's eyes were filled with fear for the first time in my memory. The fear of someone who has finally realized that her actions have repercussions. "You have 2 hours," my wife said. "Contact whoever you need to contact, find a place to stay, but after 9 o'clock tonight, I don't want to see you in this house. You can't do this to me. I'm your mother, and a mother doesn't abuse her daughter's children, steal, or lie." My wife took another step closer. "You haven't been my mother for a long time. You've been a parasite." My mother-in-law tried one last desperate attack. "He's brainwashing you. He recorded those videos to manipulate you." "No," my wife responded with a terrifying calm. "He installed those cameras to protect our family from you." I stood in the hallway, watching the power shift, and I didn't intervene. There was no need. My wife had found her voice, her backbone, her limit, and for the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of hope for our marriage. The war was about to end, but the most important victory had already been won. My wife had opened her eyes, and the next day, I witnessed something I never expected to see. My wife, with a glacial calm I didn't know she possessed, was helping her mother pack. There were no screams or pleas, just a heavy silence that seemed to crush the air in the room. My mother-in-law made one last desperate attempt at manipulation, throwing herself on the suite floor and sobbing with a performance she had perfected over decades. "He's turned you against me," she wailed, clutching the hem of my wife's jeans like a toddler. "I'm your mother. You cannot do this to me." My wife paused and gazed down at her. The coldness in her words sent shivers down my spine. "No, you did it. You harmed my daughter. You shoved a youngster into the pool and stole from my own home." She knelt to her mother's level. "It is over." For the first time in my life, I noticed genuine terror in my mother-in-law's eyes. The woman who had ruled my wife for decades realized she had lost all control in an instant. "You have no right," she cried, standing up with urgency she had never displayed. "This house should be mine. I am blood family." "Family?" My wife stood up, and I saw the powerful lady who had been hiding behind the obedient daughter for years. "A family does not pressure its children. A family does not steal. A family does not contact social services to harm innocent people." The mother-in-law played one final card. "You're going to regret this. You are nothing without me. I raised you. I gave you everything. You conditioned me. You manipulated me. You taught me to value your comfort over the health of my own baby." My wife's voice broke, not from weakness, but from liberty. "Not anymore." 2 hours later, her sister arrived to bring her up. The anxiety in the air was evident when my sister-in-law came and noticed the baggage. "What really happened?" she inquired directly. I didn't have to answer. My wife handed her her phone, which was playing one of the videos. I watched my sister-in-law's face turn from shock to loathing as she saw her mother take from my desk. "Oh my God, Mother. What else have you done?" My mother-in-law tried her last move. They're fake videos. He manipulated them. But my sister-in-law had already seen enough. Get your things. Let's go. My mother-in-law turned to me with a look of pure hatred. This isn't over. I'm going to destroy you. I walked up to her and said, in the calmest voice I could muster, you already tried and you lost. The next morning my wife's phone was constantly vibrating with text messages and Facebook notifications from her friends, neighbors, and distant cousins. I thought that was the end of the war, but I was mistaken. The war had only changed the battlefields. How could you abandon your own mother? Your mother is devastated. My mother-in-law had launched her nuclear bomb, painting herself as a frail, elderly woman, unjustly kicked out by a controlling son-in-law and a brainwashed daughter. She claims her son-in-law manipulated you into hating her. I saw your mother's post and how awful. I'm praying for her. I watched my wife read the post, her face a mask of fury and pain, and I feared the old doubt would return, but then she looked up and met my gaze with steely eyes. She talked about how she only wanted to reunite the family, and how her heart was broken. She didn't mention the theft, the call to social services, or the pool incident. She was the ideal victim. I'm sure many of you have seen my mother's post, but I'd like you to watch this first, because the facts speak for themselves. Instead of responding to the post or starting a comment war, she did something much smarter. She formed a WhatsApp group with key family members and sent a single message to them. She attached the videos of the theft, the sabotage, and the audio of the call to social services. Then, with a terrifying calm, she posted a single public comment under her mother's post. Mom, it breaks my heart that you've chosen to make this public with a version so far from reality. The decision we made was the hardest of my life, and it was to protect my daughter. The mother-in-law's post was exposed for what it was, a lie, and the tone of the messages changed within hours. The family, now armed with irrefutable evidence, took our side. Shortly after, we noticed that my mother-in-law had deleted her post, unable to bear the humiliation. Her last weapon had blown up in her face, and she was now completely alone. That night, my wife did something that showed me that the healing had truly begun. She took an old velvet box from the closet, which contained a pile of jewelry rings, bracelets, and a pearl necklace. What is this? I asked. It's the jewelry my mother gave me, she said, her voice firm. Every piece came with a condition, a favor with a string attached. They aren't gifts, they're shackles. The next day, we went to a pawn shop together, and we sold everything. We didn't want to keep anything that reminded us of that venomous snake. With the money, we planned our next family vacation. That afternoon, we sat down with our daughter. Remember how you've always wanted to go to the amusement park in Orlando? My wife remarked. And how Grandma always said it was a waste of time and money? My daughter nodded, a shadow of sadness in her eyes. Well, my wife continued, taking her hands. Grandma was incorrect. Dreams are not a waste of time. They are the most significant aspect. And we're going on our next trip. How does that sound? My daughter's eyes grew like saucers, brimming with tears of surprise and joy. The mother-in-law's special malice, which had not only ostracized her but also mocked her wishes, was being destroyed and used as fuel to realize those precise ambitions. That night, as my daughter slept, my wife looked at me and said, "My mother was slowly stealing our happiness. Now it's time to reclaim it." And for the first time in years, my house felt like the home it was always supposed to be. A few months later, the war's echoes faded. We transformed her old guest suite, the Viper's Nest, into a family movie theater. Nights of screaming and tension were replaced by popcorn-filled movie marathons. Our daughter's laughter was the sole sound in the corridor. A phone call revealed the true conclusion. It was my sister-in-law. My wife moved away to converse, and when she returned, her expression was a muddled mix of sadness and relief. She sat next to me in silence for a long time. "What happened?" I inquired calmly. She took a deep breath. It was my sister. She could not take it anymore. The lies and deception, attempting to turn her against her own husband. It followed the same old pattern. She halted and glanced at me. They had her committed. Mom is currently in a nursing facility. The news landed in the room like a stone. There was no celebration, no joy, only the weight of an unavoidable conclusion. My wife's voice broke as she continued. "My sister and I will pay half and half. It's the best place they could find, but that's how she lives today." I held her tightly. "You did not put her there," I whispered. "She built the road herself, brick by brick." As a final act of closure, my wife tore up the 3 unopened letters her mother had sent her a few days before. "Our daughter, free of the shadow of condemnation, has grown into a more confident, louder, and happier youngster. One night, my wife took my hands and whispered something that both broke and healed me. My family consists of only you and her. Forgive me for taking so long to see it. Now I'd like to ask you. What would you have done in my place? Was I overly severe, or should I have responded sooner? Edit. We fulfilled our commitment. We traveled to Orlando last month. When I saw my daughter meet her favorite characters and scream with joy on every ride, I knew we had truly won. She knelt to her mother's level. It's over. For the first time in my life, I noticed genuine terror in my mother-in-law's eyes. The woman who had ruled my wife for decades realized she had lost all control in an instant. You have no right, she cried, standing up with urgency she had never displayed. This house should be mine. I'm blood family. Family? My wife stood up, and for the first time, I saw the strong woman who had been hiding for years behind the obedient daughter. A family doesn't push children. A family doesn't steal. A family doesn't call social services to hurt innocent people. The mother-in-law played one final card. You're going to regret this. You're nothing without me. I raised you. I gave you everything. You conditioned me. You manipulated me. You taught me to prioritize your comfort over the well-being of my own daughter. My wife's voice broke. Not from weakness, but from liberty. Not anymore. 2 hours later, her sister arrived to bring her up. The anxiety in the air was evident when my sister-in-law came and noticed the baggage. What really happened? She inquired directly. I didn't have to answer. My wife handed her a phone with one of the videos playing. I watched my sister-in-law's face turn from shock to loathing as she saw her mother take from my desk. Oh my God, Mom, what else have you done? My mother-in-law tried her final move. They're fake videos. He manipulated them. However, my sister-in-law had already seen enough. Get your things, let's go. My mother-in-law gave me a look of utter loathing. This isn't over. I'm going to destroy you. I walked up to her and, in the calmest voice I could summon, stated, You already tried and lost. Now leave. I assumed that was it. I was mistaken. The conflict had just shifted the battlefields. The next morning, my wife awoke to her phone vibrating non-stop. It was text messages and Facebook updates from her friends, neighbors, and distant cousins. How could you throw your own mother out on the street? Your mom is heartbroken. She says her son-in-law manipulated you into hating her. I saw your mother's post. How awful. I'm praying for her. My mother-in-law had launched a nuclear weapon. She had put a lengthy, sad story on her Facebook profile, a masterpiece of fabrication. She portrayed herself as a fragile, elderly woman who was unfairly booted out by her domineering son-in-law and indoctrinated daughter. She expressed how she merely wanted to reunite the family, and how her heart was torn. She made no mention of the theft, the call to social services, or the pool incident. She was a wonderful victim. My wife read the post with a furious and pained expression on her face. For a brief moment, I feared the old doubt might resurface, but she looked up and met my gaze with steely determination. The time for being quiet is over, she remarked. She did not respond to the post. She did not begin a comment war. She did something far smarter. She made a WhatsApp group for essential family members and sent a single message. I know many of you have seen my mother's post. Before anything else, I ask you to watch this. The facts speak for themselves. She sent footage of the theft and sabotage, as well as audio of the call to social services. Then, with scary calm, she left a single public comment beneath her mother's post. Mom, it breaks my heart that you've chosen to make this public with a version so far from reality. The decision we made was the hardest of my life, and it was to protect my daughter. I'm not going to engage in a war here. Our close family already knows the whole truth. It was checkmate. The mother-in-law's post was exposed as what it was. A lie. Within hours, the tone of the communications had shifted. The pals who attacked her have since written to apologize. The family, now equipped with indisputable proof, joined our cause. Shortly after, we realized my mother-in-law had erased her post, unable to take the embarrassment. Her last weapon had exploded in her face. Now she was entirely alone. That night, my wife did something to show me that the healing process had begun. She removed an old velvet box from the closet. Inside, there was a collection of jewels, including rings, bracelets, and a pearl necklace. What's this? I inquired. It's the jewelry my mother gave me, she explained, her voice steely. Every piece came with a condition, with a favor, with a string attached. They aren't gifts. They're shackles. The following day we went to a pawn shop together. We sold every item. We did not want to keep anything that reminded us of the dangerous snake. With the money, we planned our next family holiday. That afternoon, we sat with our daughter.
Yeah.
Remember how you've always wanted to go to the amusement park in Orlando? My spouse asked me. And remember how Grandma always said it was a waste of time and money? My daughter nodded, a hint of melancholy in her eyes. Well, my spouse said as she raised her hands. Grandma was wrong. Your dreams are not a waste of time. They are the most important thing. And we're going on our next vacation. How does that sound? My daughter's eyes grew like saucers, brimming with tears of surprise and joy. The mother-in-law's special malice, which had not only excluded but also belittled her wishes, was being destroyed and used as fuel to accomplish those precise goals. That night, as my daughter slept, my wife looked at me and said, "My mother was slowly stealing our happiness. Now it's time to reclaim it." And for the first time in years, my house felt like the home it was always supposed to be. A few months later, the war's echoes faded. We converted the old guest suite, her previous viper's nest, into a family movie theater. Nights of screaming and tension were replaced by popcorn-filled movie marathons. Our daughter's laughter was the sole sound in the corridor. A phone call revealed the true conclusion. It was my sister-in-law. My wife moved away to converse, and when she returned, her expression was a muddled mix of sadness and relief. She sat next to me in silence for a long time. "What happened?" I inquired calmly. She took a deep breath. "It was my sister. She couldn't take it anymore, the lies, the manipulation, trying to turn her against her own husband. It was the same old pattern." She glanced at me for a moment. "They had her committed. Mom is in a nursing home." The news landed in the room like a stone. There was no celebration, no joy, only the weight of an unavoidable conclusion. "My sister and I will pay half and half," my wife said, her voice quivering. "It's the best place they could find, but that's her life now." I held her tightly. "You didn't put her there," I said. "She built that road herself, brick by brick." As a final act of closure, my wife tore up the 3 unopened letters her mother had sent her a few days before. Our daughter, free of the shadow of condemnation, has grown into a more confident, louder, and happier youngster. One night, my wife took my hands and whispered something that both broke and healed me. "My family is you and her, no one else. Forgive me for taking so long to see it. Now I ask you, what would you have done in my place? Was I too harsh, or should I have acted sooner?" Edit. We fulfilled our commitment. We traveled to Orlando last month. When I saw my daughter meet her favorite characters and scream with joy on every ride, I knew we had truly won.